I thought I'd talk through the chaotic and experimental process for this drawing. I say chaotic and experimental because this wasn't a drawing for me where I knew exactly what the process would be and where it was going 100%. So you'll see a lot of my thought process and trying different things out and really testing my limited perspective skills. The idea all started from some B-roll of myself for a video that I scrapped, but essentially it was some footage of me waiting for a package to arrive. I thought the energy, or lack thereof, of the pose was interesting and it sparked an idea that I thought about for a while afterwards. I was thinking about the endless feeling of stale anticipation, when you're waiting for something to happen in your life, and how sometimes you don't know if the very thing you're waiting for will turn out good or bad. This idea kept coming up in my mind, and I thought, how can I interpret this with the starting point I have with my reference image? I wanted to improve myself and do something out of my comfort zone, so I knew I wanted to draw an interior environment. Really early on, I knew I wanted to have what was outside be weird or mysterious, kind of otherworldly, to contrast with how normal the inside of the house is. To be honest, I also didn't want to make what was outside detailed at all, since the inside was already going to be challenging for me. So the idea is some sort of ominous darkness that is pushing or seeping into the room. But to make it more mysterious, I wanted it to be filled with stars, to make the viewer kind of wonder what its intentions are. It's creepy, but also magical at the same time. And then she is just sitting there watching it seep through her doorway, but she's been waiting for it for so long she just kind of feels numb. She knows she can't do anything about it, she can't control it or its intentions, so she is just waiting. My art usually isn't so deep, but maybe it should be, since this piece seemed to have connected with a lot of people when I shared it online, at least more so than my recent artworks. Since characters are what I'm most experienced with, I started with cleaning up and refining the girl, and then I can figure everything else out around her. The angle of her head was a bit of a challenge though, because it's not exactly a straight on profile, it's kind of more towards the back of her head than the front, if that makes sense, which is just not an angle I've done very often. Plus her head is also tilted back, so we are seeing the underside of her chin, which is also challenging to get to look right. I'm not sure if I really nailed it. Looking back, I think you'd say it just looks like a side profile, but I think I managed to get the head tilt right in the end. I really needed to see some clear guidelines for the planes of the face to get this one right, and I wasn't getting that enough from my reference image, so instead I used a 3D Loomis head mock-up kind of model and matched the angle I needed and referenced that instead. I'll link the website for you to check out in the description. I use this tool a lot when I need a little extra help planning things out. I feel like seeing the face broken down into simpler shapes makes it a lot easier to visualize what's happening. It's also a fantastic tool when it comes to lighting, as you can set up different lighting scenarios and see which planes of the face are in light or shadow. This tool was a huge part in how I taught myself to draw and paint faces, so definitely check it out. I started to draw in some of the interior, basing it off my rough sketch, but I realized I should make sure the perspective is right for the whole room first. I try a lot of different things for this, but I'm starting with a grid for all of the planes of the room, which at first I thought was working okay, until I realized that the door was actually tiny. Because if you follow the guidelines from the top of the door to the left wall, the mirror is a lot higher than the door, so if she's standing and going to be able to look in the mirror, then she's going to hit her head on the door frame on her way out. So my next thought was to have the door actually be further away from her, but then it doesn't make as much sense for the illustration. I tried making everything smaller in the room so you see more, but that made me feel like there was too much space, because it's really important that we see the entire door and door frame, since that's going to be a focal point for the illustration. I start refining some things in the room before realizing this though. I also feel like the perspective just kind of feels boring and expected. And as you can see, I try some more perspective setups and I finally figure out that the horizon line should be lower and the vanishing point to the left instead of the middle. This way we get a more dramatic angle where the girl is sitting and can see a bit more on the right. Once my smooth brain figured that out, actually drawing everything in was pretty easy. I set up a perspective guide in Procreate and turned on Drawing Assist, and just started by drawing a box on the floor where things were going to sit, and then building them up to get the base shapes down. I drew a box for everything, no matter what shape it would be, because you're restricted to the lines you can use when Drawing Assist is on. But that's fine, because after you're finished setting up the scene, you can draw in the proper shapes using the boxes as guides. And now I'm just adding in the details and drawing the line art. I'm trying to detail things with the line art as much as possible. The more detail you add, the less you have to render things later, I feel like, because it already feels busier. That's why I added the wainscoting, I think it's called, on the walls so they aren't so plain. I draw some plants and trinkets, rugs, clothes, and even some cat toys stuck onto the cabinet. It was a lot of fun filling in the space. I thought mostly about stuff that I like and how I would decorate, while also keeping a theme of stars and moons throughout. I'll let you watch the rest of the line art and details being drawn and come back to talk about the rest afterwards. I'm drawing in the cats now. The first one is super cheeky and being a classic cat, knocking stuff off the cabinet. The second is just sleeping in her lap, and the third is more curious about what is going on outside and is walking towards it. Placing them in these spots was intentional because I wanted to spread them out in the canvas so your eye kind of looks around a bit more. I spent a lot of time going back and forwards with how I wanted the dark ooze, or whatever it is, to interact inside. My original idea was to have it like spider webbing in, but then it started giving off purely sinister vibes, and I really wanted it to be more mysterious than that. The main idea was that you don't really know if it's good or bad. So I played around with it being more of a thick substance that was like oozing into the room, and I think that worked a lot better for this artwork. Back to what I was saying earlier with adding more details with the line work, I wanted to give her some tattoos. This gives her some more personality, ties in with the theme of the artwork, and also fills in some blank space on the character, which makes her look more detailed. I experimented with a few different designs, which are all essentially the same thing. Definitely overthinking this small detail, but I can't help myself. And of course, second guessing my decision with the doorway. I'm trying more versions of the same thing and some other weird ideas that I thought were cool, but maybe for a different drawing. I end up settling on what I had before and add in some stars and lines to show the volume of the dark substance. I'm adding some thicker lines around the characters as well to help define their shapes. Now my least favourite part, choosing colours. I have no idea what I want for colours. When I started this, my only idea was to have her hair and the cats be black to match the black stuff outside, but you'll see I realized that this isn't the best choice later. I'm basically just adding a random color to all the items in the room, and I have each color set as its own layer so I can recolor things easily after I have them all filled in. I wanted to limit how many colors were in the artwork as well, so once I picked the main colors of green, gold, neutral tones, and lilac, I pretty much just went around trying these colors in different items. I liked her outfit being dark, and so that meant that the cat in her lap didn't have enough contrast to be noticeable. So I tried changing them to lighter color cats, but it's not really fitting in the theme of the artwork. But I'll come back to them later. I've changed the color of my liner and set it to multiply to get a better idea of how the colors will look. At this point, I think I'm liking the direction it's going in until my husband told me it looks boring and not like my usual work, which was annoying to hear after finally making a decision, but honestly, he was right. So I decided to make everything darker and decided to change the cats into Patronuses or ghost kitties. As soon as I did this, the artwork felt so much more like me and the themes I like to draw. I needed to change her hair color as well, as the dark wasn't working in terms of values in the artwork. And I chose an orange color to complement the blue tones of the cats. Right now this is all a messy mock-up for the colors, so I'm roughly adding in some light sources, trying to plan out how to set the mood and focal points, and separate the characters from the background. I think this worked really well. Once I had a good idea of what I wanted, I saved my canvas and then added it as a reference on Procreate and color picked from there and just recolored all the elements in the artwork. At this point, Procreate was having a meltdown and I had to flatten my artwork as much as possible. So right now I'm pretty much working with the whole background colors flattened as one layer, then the character is also one layer and the cats are separate as well as the stars and the black ooze. I added a screen layer on top of my character and another one on top of my background, and I start adding in some lighting. The light source is the warm lamp above and behind her, as well as a softer purple-blue light source coming from the cats. And then I add a multiply layer for both the background and the character separately and start adding in some shadows. It's a bit hard to see all the details being rendered since they are small and the image is so dark, so I apologize if it doesn't look like much is happening in this phase, but I'm basically just painting over most of it and adding texture. I used my brushes from my Pretty Gritty brush pack for this whole artwork. I'll have a link in the description if you're interested in checking them out. I'm obsessed with these brushes. I feel like the texture just adds some soft visual noise and just makes the artwork look more human-made and visually interesting. After I have these basic colors down, I'm pretty much just rendering everything, mostly color picking from the canvas. I'll let you just watch the process for this part. When I get to rendering the umbrella, I'm kind of over it at this point a little and decide it doesn't add anything to the image, so I decide just to paint over it and remove it. I'm adding some room light around the character to help her stand out a bit more, and then just noodling on the rendering again. After all the rendering is done, I add an overlay layer which adds so much more mood to the piece. I added a dark colour around the edges and then intensify some of the lighting already in the artwork. I realised that it might look like she only has one arm and try out some poses to show the other arm, but end up deciding it doesn't matter and it can just be hidden by her body on the other side. Or maybe she only has one arm, and that's cool too. And yeah, this is the final result. What do you think? Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of hearing about the making of this one, and yeah. Okay, bye!